In today's video, we're going to talk about useless nutrition advice we've been taught through the years. Hey, what's shaking bacon? My name is Bruno Panucci. I hope you're doing well. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. If you like, leave a comment at the bottom of this video about nutritional advice you've heard from professionals that has turned out to be nonsense through the years. I actually had to really whittle this list down because there's so much. You have to keep in mind, most of the nutritional advice our science is based off of weak science. They're epidemiology studies. It's really difficult and expensive to do good quality, high quality nutritional studies to prove or disprove theories. So when we hear certain foods are good for us or certain foods are bad for us, quite often, most of that information comes from epidemiology studies. An epidemiology study is like a big questionnaire. It might go out to thousands of people or it might go out to tens of thousands of people. They might last over a period of years or decades. But what happens is it's better than nothing. That design of study is there for a purpose. It's there to help us build theories off of. So if they noticed over a period of 20 years that lots of people were dying in some country in Europe from heart attack and stroke or had a high cancer risk, they might look at diet and lifestyle in these questionnaires to try and draw correlations. They want to try and figure out what the cause might be. So once those studies are done, they'll make a hypothesis based on the data they gathered. And with that data, they want to go the next step to a high quality study to try and prove or disprove their theory. You always want to try and disprove your theory as much as you want to prove your theory. And it turns out most nutritional science is based off of these epidemiology studies. And lots of theories have come out of them, but unfortunately those theories are often treated as fact. And that's a serious problem, especially once the media gets a hold of this. They'll make a headline, a sort of clickbait. Clickbait has been around long before the internet. It was just called sensational news headlines. They want to give you a piece of information that's going to catch your attention, like carrots are bad for you, or carrots are good for you now, carrots are bad for you again. And what's happening in those situations, each of those studies that information came from was trying to prove or disprove a different thing about carrots. But the media wants to dumb it down and try and convince you that this is the new science. This is the new thing we have to pay attention to. And in the process, we've had a lot of good foods taken out of our way of eating, one of which seems to be fat. Here's the perspective I want you to pay attention to with this video. 70% of North America is pre-diabetic or diabetic. Think about that number. That is a ridiculously huge number. Most of this nutritional advice that was given out over the last 20, 30, 40 years has been really bad nutritional advice if you're diabetic. If you're diabetic, your body is basically sensitive or allergic to carbohydrates, and we need to manage those things. We need to respect the fact that our body just doesn't process it well. Usually happens with age, but it can happen at a younger age. And here's a good indication that your body's not doing too well with sugar and carbohydrates. You're overweight. You have some form of insulin resistance. Now, there's other factors that come into play, and there's ways we can manage this. So let's talk about some of this misinformation that was once peddled as science and fact that we know now is completely off. One of the first ones I want to point out is there's no such thing as a bad food. Well, that's not really accurate, is there? Because that's ignoring eating disorders. If there's people, and a lot of people, who have eating disorders, and one of the more common ones is a carbohydrate or sugar addiction that people will admit to in a friendly way, but they don't really take it too seriously, but it's an actual issue. You mention a carnivore diet to most people, and most people would say, oh, I could never do that. Well, why is that? Well, I don't want to give up my alcohol, or I don't want to give up my pasta or my bread. And so they're outright saying they could just never give that up. When the reality is, when you have enough health problems or enough incentive, you'll give those foods up. And they're admitting right off the bat that they have difficulty doing that. You should be able to cut any food out of your diet. I don't care if it's steak, chicken, seafood, vegetables, fruit, any one particular food from any of those categories or all of them, dairy. You should be able to cut any of those out for a day, week, or a month and not have to think twice about it. It shouldn't affect you if you cut anything out. So yes, clearly there are some foods that aren't good for us. And if you try cutting out caffeine and you feel like crap for the first week, there's an indication that you're going through a withdrawal. That's a caffeine addiction. And you can often get the same feeling when you cut out carbohydrates or sugar. Fruits and vegetables happen to be really high in carbohydrates and sugar. If you fall in that category of 70% of the population with prediabetes or diabetes, and you know what? You have to take into account that maybe you need to manage that food better. 8 glasses of water a day. That's such an overly simplified piece of advice. People think if they get their 8 glasses a day, they're good. Some of those people are really active, and some of those people are just not active. And the reality is, you need enough water to keep yourself hydrated. Simple as that. I personally think that we need a little bit less water if you're carnivore, because we don't have carbohydrates in our body helping us to hold on to water. I think our needs go down a little bit. I can't prove it, but that's what I think. There's no magic amount of water you're supposed to have in a day. You need as much water as it takes for your urine to be like lemonade. You want it pale. You don't want it clear. You don't want it dark like apple juice. You want to make sure you're getting enough water to keep that going. If you have a really active day, or you sweat more through the day, or maybe you sat down and didn't do anything through the day and you just watched Netflix for the day, you're not going to need as much water on that day. And on the days you're more active, you're going to need more. So you want to keep that balance, and you want to try and shoot for a proper level of hydration. Eggs are dangerous. You know, that's pretty silly. That was all based off of a theory, a cholesterol theory that came out in the 60s and 70s from Dr. Ansel Keys, where he believed cholesterol was dangerous because that's what we find in the arteries whenever someone has a heart attack. So therefore, cholesterol is the demon, and we have to cut out saturated fats out of our diet because any food with saturated fat is contributing to this plaque in the arteries. We know that cholesterol is coming from our liver. Our dietary fat has almost nothing to do with it. Most people, when they have eggs, have toast with it. What do you think is more dangerous in that scenario? The carbohydrates, if you have a sugar sensitivity, or the fat and the protein that comes from the eggs? There's a little trace amounts of carbs in eggs, but not enough to cause the same damage 2 slices of bread would. Meat isn't healthy, especially if it's red meat. Well, we know that's not true. I even have gout, and I'm on an all-meat diet, and probably 90% of my calories comes from red meat. And my gout's the best it's ever been, especially since I've gone high fat. Meat doesn't give you as much of a bump in your blood sugar. It doesn't give you a spike like carbohydrates would. So it's healthier because your insulin's not going to go out of whack with each meal. It's going to stay at a more moderate level over a longer period of time, which is going to give you sustained energy versus highs and lows of having carbohydrates in your body. Anyone who's diabetic or pre-diabetic knows what it's like to get tired after a meal. When you're on a high-fat carnivore diet and you're not having huge meals, that goes away. Complex carbohydrates are healthier for you than simple carbohydrates. You know what? Technically, they're not wrong, but it's so marginal if you're pre-diabetic or diabetic. If you fall into that category of 70%, that's not really going to do too much for you. That's like saying, would you rather get hit by an aluminum bat or a steel bat? One's not much better for you. They're both really going to hurt. Carbohydrates in general are not good for you, whether they're complex or not. That extra little bit of fiber you're getting is so marginal, especially when you're getting processed food. When you're getting multigrain bread from most grocery stores or whole wheat bread, the amount of extra fiber in that is so minuscule. It's not really helping you that much more when you shouldn't be having any of it, or at least managing that way better. Cut the food out that you're sensitive to, and you're going to find your health gets better faster. Gluten-free is healthier. Well, that's misleading, isn't it? Because if you're having a bunch of carbohydrates that are gluten-free, it just means that's just the type of fuel you're not getting. Simple as that. Most people just replace that with other carbohydrates or starchy vegetables. That's not good either. Fruit is healthy for you. No, it's not. Fruit is not healthy for you as you get older. Even if you're a healthy person, your body doesn't process it as well as when you were a teenager. Most anyone will tell you that. The reality is your body... Hey, buddy, do you want to come up? Hey, buddy, you all right? Come on. Do you want to come up? Bodies just don't process sugar as well as it used to when we were younger. And when you're eating something that's natural sugar, well, that's all well and good. It's natural sugar. How can it be unhealthy? It came right from nature. It's still sugar. Our bodies aren't processing sugar as well as they used to. And we need to manage that food intake. Some people can just cut it back drastically and they'll be fine. Some people need to cut it out, at least until their body gets into a safer zone. And then if they need to, they can incorporate that back into their diet. When you're choosing to do a strict carnivore diet like I am, you're choosing to cut that food out completely. Partly for me because I have a sugar and carbohydrate addiction and I can't manage it very well. And that's mainly because of the addiction, but also partly because my body just doesn't process that food very well at all. So these are just examples, the tip of the iceberg. There's so much bad nutrition advice out there. We really have to pay attention to the nutrition advice we're getting and who we're getting it from. Just because someone has a lot of training in this doesn't mean they're passing on good advice. Unfortunately, because most of the knowledge they've gained through the years is from faulty science. And it's a real shame when you see people still giving advice that has been disproven decades ago. Without getting into any of the science of calories in, calories out, how does that apply when you have a hormone problem? It doesn't really work too well, does it? Yes, calories count, but they can't be the end-all be-all. When your hormones are out of balance, that plays a larger issue, more so than calories. And if you want to debate that point, have fun, because if you have hypothyroidism or insulin resistance, that means your hormones are out of balance and you're not processing food the way you normally do, and a little bit of food can go a long way to obesity. The whole point of this video is to start thinking critically about what you're doing. Even if you're doing a carnivore diet, think critically about the advice you get and where it's coming from and how much sense it makes. Do a little bit of research and legwork on your own to try and understand where that came from. What are the implications of it? And I just want you to try and pay attention to what you're putting in your body. So anyway, thanks a lot. Take care. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, if you like it, give it a thumbs up and subscribe.